Welcome to Please Me, the podcast bringing you bold conversations and big clit energy. I'm Eve, your host, on a journey from trauma to sexual liberation. Join me and my guests as we dive into conversations around orgasm equality, self-love, body positivity, and essential sexual education. Let's reclaim pleasure and close the orgasm gap one empowering conversation at a time. Last week I interviewed Annika Elmhurst, a sex coach specializing in the ethical non-monogamous and kink community. We had a very fun and interesting role play about Annika tying me up, and it is truly a must-listen. For ad-free listening and exclusive content, join me on Patreon for early releases, bonus episodes, and more. Please Me is for mature audiences. Sit back, relax, and surrender to the pleasure of Please Me.
And she goes, I have a question. How do you keep from getting distracted while you're trying to have an orgasm and you have ADHD?
Oh my God, I know.
And everybody buzzed out laughing, but then so many people go, you know what? I have that question too. Like, how do you not? Because her mind wanders, right?
Hello, and welcome to Please Me, the podcast that aims to destigmatize conversations about sex and sexual health by turning the sheets into our classroom. Today, I'm so excited to be welcoming Katherine McCord to the show. She's an international speaker and the founder and president of People's Operation consulting firm and the founder of the Neurodiverse, which is a nonprofit organization that I'm going to let her tell you all about. And she has 8 invisible disabilities. And she says that she's successful with her diagnoses instead of in spite of them. And so with that being said, I want to bring you onto the show and welcome you today. Katherine, how are you?
I'm wonderful, Eve. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here with you. This is one of my favorite topics. And so I cannot wait to dive into it. I've been an entrepreneur now for over 10 years. I have also started a not-for-profit called the Neuroverse. And that is the weirdest name in the whole wide world. I realize that people keep going, it's cute, but it's so hard to say. And it's so
Neuroverse or
Neuroverse. No, it's Neuroverse.
Oh, I spelled it wrong. I spelled it
wrong. It's easy to do because it's a made up word, so you're okay. But it's super fun, and it's all for neuro. It's all about neurodiversity. And in fact, and I told you I was going to bring this story up, and this is the perfect time. So I just had our first big event. It was so exciting. We did it in the metaverse, and everybody could jump on. No special equipment was required or anything. People came in and joined us, and we had speakers, and it created like a whole little world of neurodiversity. And one of our speakers is a sex therapist, a very positive, forward-thinking sex therapist. And at the beginning of her session, we're just kind of waiting around, for everybody to show up. And one of my friends, who did, by the way, give me full permission to share this story, asked her and did not realize, by the way, that she'd done this feature called Take the Mic so that then the entire place could hear her. The entire world could hear her say this. And she goes, I have a question. How do you keep from getting distracted while you're trying to have an orgasm when you have ADHD?
Oh my God. I know.
And everybody just buzzed out laughing. But then so many people go, you know what? I have that question too. Like, how do you not? Because her mind wanders, right? So it's like, she's like, my husband's doing all the right things, but my brain's like, so I need to, on this day, I ate a hot dog and maybe that's what upset my tummy and I need to go clean the house. And she's like, my brain is just all these other places. So how do I do that? And it was really funny. And of course, Jessica Raynard, who's an amazing, amazing person, she gave some wonderful advice about how to stay present and all that. But just that mindset, it reminds us that neurodiversity does add a different aspect to sex, as does disability in general.
100%. And, when you have difficulty focusing, that's going to inhibit your ability to have an orgasm because your mind is somewhere else. And if you have a history of abuse, I come from that arena and your mind often jumps to the abuse itself. And so getting your mind out of that too and bringing yourself to the present moment and really connecting with your body and with the right now is so key to really enjoying sex. So I love that example. I think it's such a funny story and so relevant because we all need to stay present in order to really accept pleasure. And it's a skill. So, do you remember what the sex therapist
Yeah.
said? What was her answer to that question? Because I think it's such a relevant question.
It's great. And I will say this is a total paraphrase of
Of
what she
course.
said. But basically what she said was she said, do grounding work as you're having sex to stay present. So focusing on specific things about your partner. How are they breathing? How are you breathing in response to that? How are they moving? What you pay attention to each little feeling. What does that do for the rest of your body? How are you feeling? And just doing the actual work. And she said, eventually this will start naturally occurring. That's what your body will default to because then it's habit. She said, but the first few times it's going to feel a little awkward, but actually going through these grounding exercises is very helpful. She said, and if your partner is receptive, it's wonderful if you could do it with them. So share, what it is that you're going through and feeling, and they can respond with what they're going through and feeling. And then that brings you into the present. And I thought that was so genius. And she was so graceful with how she handled that question too. She was, wow, okay, we're just gonna dive right on in and just went with it. It was so funny. But I loved to seeing so many people get enthusiastic. That was one of our best attended talks. People were like, oh my gosh, yes, I need to talk about this. Because while neurodiversity has, which by the way, for anyone listening who doesn't know, that's just a medically visible or diagnosable difference in how the brain processes. So think on the medical spectrum, maybe traumatic brain injury, cerebral palsy, multiple sclerosis. Then on the learning and communication, you have ADHD, you have autism, right, and dyslexia. Then on the mental health spectrum, all those fun diagnoses as well, some of those crossover. So that's what neurodiversity is. And there are inherent benefits that's been proven. Johns Hopkins has done work on that, National Institute of Health, National Library of Medicine, PLS Genetics. They all have great studies on that about the benefits, and there are, but then there is a disability aspect too. And especially if one has had trauma on top of that. So now you've got this complex relationship with your body chemicals and your neuroprocesses, and you've got trauma, and that adds to it. And then if you also have a physical disability, especially an invisible one, it can get really complicated. And for me, I've had a lot of complications. I had multiple neurodiversity.
I'd love to know what those are because I know that you talked about having 8 invisible disabilities. And it's interesting because I too have that in my family. I won't go into the details, but I think it's so important for people to understand that what you see on the surface is not necessarily what's happening under the surface, right? What's happening in the brain. So why don't you talk to us about your experience with your, disabilities and how they've affected you in your life and in your sex life?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So, I have I have so many of them. So hold on, let me see if I can get the list right in one shot. So obsessive compulsive disorder. I have misophonia, which means that certain sounds make my nervous system malfunction, which that plays into sex. Let me tell you, we're going to talk about that in just a moment. Then we have the bipolar one. And what that means is that I have long downs, long mids, long ups. And so it's not constant fluctuation, but when my chemicals are different, man, are they different, right? Then I do have one other mental health diagnoses that I have. On the physical spectrum, I have a seizure disorder that is neuro related, which is also a neurodiversity. I have a heart arrhythmia, and then I also have mast cell activation syndrome. There you go, MCAS, which basically means that my body will randomly throw me into anaphylaxis over random things in my environment. Okay. It means also I'm very food sensitive, breathing issues, so on and so forth. I have COPD, and I have, and some of these, by the way, are actually related. That's why I only count them as 8. And then I also, they are like the seizures is actually part of the MCAS, but I like to specify it because it does have its own set of characteristics. And then I have interstitial cystitis. There we go. Abbreviated as IC, which is a bladder condition. It is also autoimmune, just like the MCAS. And then the last one that I had for many years, which played very heavily into my sex life, or the last 3 actually, they were combined. I had menorrhagia, which basically means that when you have periods, it's not only super bloody, to the point that sometimes you need transfusions, but I would grow clots the size of my fist. And it was, it was a
That's
lot.
that's like birthing a baby almost. You know?
Multiple, and then there'd be multiple ones like coming out.
Wow.
It was,
That's gonna be painful.
it was, and it was pretty nasty. Like, it was painful and gross and make you, it's just raw, and it was so bad. And then I also, despite being told I did not have either of these things for many years, when they did my hysterectomy, they found out that not only were my tubes completely lined with cysts, which I've always had cyst problems, I still do with my ovaries, which we left in hoping I wouldn't go into menopause, but I did. And so
it'll happen eventually, no matter what, you know?
And it's fine. Actually, it's not that big of a deal. We'll talk about that and how that played into sex too. But it was so funny. So then I had endometriosis and adenomyosis, which is the opposite of endometriosis. So it's on the outside. So I had it on the inside and the outside, and my uterus was just all kinds of jacked up. So, and thanks to my husband, I also only had half a cervix left when it. I hated
him, huh?
Well, it kind of was his fault, not intentional, but it received a lot of damage over the years. Not his fault at all. That was my body, and sometimes being shifting oddly and things like that. So it was not really his fault, but I like to tease him about it. But it was a lot, and especially when you think about all the things that were happening in that area, right?
Yes.
Like in that, like even just the thing. So cysts, just crazy amount of cysts, the menorrhea, which then leaves you raw for days even after your period, and then the endometriosis, the adenomyosis. So I was perpetually in pain, just always in pain for years and years, and to the point that it just became my normal. Mm-hmm. Like that was just it. This is just how it
And was sex also painful for you?
Actually, no. Isn't it the weirdest? That's the thing that always just blew my doctor's minds, is that there were certain positions that were complicated. So doggy was always a little hard on me because the way that it shifted my organs. If I did anything that was with me on my belly, but also kind of with my shoulders at an incline. So, kind of like this, that would push everything down, and that could get painful. And standing was painful for many years during sex. But in general, no. Most sex was very pleasurable, I have kind of a hyper response to sex. So once I am comfortable and everything, I will have like crazy number of orgasms, crazy quality of orgasms.
That's a blessing, because when you have all of these conditions, you have to have pleasure somewhere, right? So at least that was like a good outlet for you to sort of de-stress, to like feel pleasure, and it affects your mental health too, so yeah, absolutely.
And the bipolar, when I'm manic, makes me hyper sexual, even more so than normal. So I already have a high sex drive, just at a base level, right? Even when I'm depressed, I'm like, yes, let's go, let's do it.
Okay, that's interesting.
It is. And I think it is what you said. I think that it's because that's always been a release point for me. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? That's the time when my body even feels better, so my body craves that. And especially with my partner, feeling very connected to him. And he's very good at making you feel comfortable and making you feel safe. And like, this is a good thing, and you're okay when it's happening. And
the bottom line is, that when you do have an orgasm, you're releasing all of those neurochemicals, all of those feel good chemicals, right? That make us feel amazing. So it's actually like balancing your neurological system in a way, especially if you're like on a down,
Yes.
I mean, it'll bring you up.
It brings you peace. And actually, even what was explained to me by my doctor is, because she's done so many studies of me, she just thinks my body is so interesting. So she likes to study my blood work at different times, right? And what she said, your body releases a great deal of serotonin, after sex and things like that. She said, I think even it soothes your manic phases too. And that's part of, that craving. But it's also just a characteristic of being bipolar, that when you're in your manic stage, you get hypersexual. But then there's the misophonia. So I hate the sound of people kissing. Like if people are kissing, it makes me want to slap them. I don't. I just want to put that out there. I have never
like in your area, in your surroundings, or like
anywhere. Like it can't be on TV. It can't be on a video. It can't be in my surroundings.
How about you kissing? Do you like to kiss? Because
Yes. And so it doesn't bother me if I'm doing it to a point, but I'm like, to a point. But my husband did have to learn that there are certain types of like when he was kiss certain places on my body that I'd start going, "Mm." And he was like, okay, that's a no-go right now.
You don't like the noise of that. That's
fine. I don't like the noise. Yeah, it's all like the sensation of it, right? But then I'm like, but don't do it. I hate it. I hate the noise that makes me upset. And it actually it can give you headaches. It can make you agitated. It can, kind of just kind of make you cringe, make it hard to process what's going on. So sound is super important. But yeah, I hate the sound of people kissing.
That reminds me. It reminds me of my boyfriend who hates the sound of people chewing.
Oh, same thing. Yeah, I hate the sound of that too. Yeah.
And it gives him like this feeling, like I guess anxiety or something. And he's like, stop chewing. I'm like, I mean, you gotta chew if you're eating, right?
He might have misophonia. I'm just throwing that out there. It's a very little known condition, but yeah, he might.
I think he does, and it's interesting. Like maybe we need to put some music on right now so that everyone can eat peacefully without you getting upset. Hey, I have a personal question to ask you. Are you experiencing vaginal dryness? Are you looking for an all-natural lube that helps you get the juices flowing? I will give you a tip on what I use. I use Bonnie's Herbals. I use the sex butter for those intimate moments, and I use the boudoir butter for my everyday moisture. And these have been game changers for me. So check out the link in the show notes and get yours today. I'm curious to know how your OCD affected your sex life, because when you have OCD, you want everything to be so clean and neat, and sex is messy. So how has that affected? Since we're getting down and personal here.
Oh no, it's fine.
Let me hear about that.
So OCD. So first of all, OCD manifests differently for everybody, and even on the clean and neat. So I'll obsessively wash my hands in a very specific way, certain length of time, all of specific materials, or soaps and things like that. But sex can just go everywhere, and I'm okay with it. But I don't on my body. But I don't want it to get on my pillow. So we have a sex blanket. It's literally called the Play Blanket. You can get it on Amazon. Great buy. It absorbs everything. And we get some marathon level sex going sometimes. So I can vouch for these things. We lay those suckers out, and it makes such a difference. And then I can just ball it up, put it in the wash, and we're good. Right. So I don't mind it on me. He can come on me, he can lick me, he can, as long as there's no slurping, he can lick on me, he can do all these things, and it's perfectly fine. It is perfectly fine. I actually, back when I still had periods, I was actually even fine with the idea of having sex on my period. He was not. He was like, not with your periods, they're horrifying. I said, fair enough, because they're horror movie grade periods. So I was like, that's fair enough. But
that's one thing that he didn't want to explore.
He was like, no. And he's so good about so many things. But that he was like, no, I can't do it. It's too upsetting. And I said, okay, that's fine. But he's always been very mindful of my body. So if I say, ow, that hurts, he's very good about, oh, okay, that's all right. This is the thing. And it's been interesting too, because he has different neurodiversities than me. So he's on the spectrum, the autism spectrum. And so coming together with those different, communication needs and styles and physical needs and styles and all that. And it's been a lot of just talking, right? And just saying, this is the thing that I need. This is the thing that I want. But also just being okay with it. Because if you get self-conscious, and a lot of people in the neurodivergent spectrum, they get super self-conscious, right? It's easy to do. But would you talk to your partner about how they feel about things you did? I'll ask them, I made that weird, rhinoceros noise in the middle of sex. How did you feel about that? And he'll go, it was so hot, because that meant that you were enjoying what I'm doing. And he's into it. So I'm like, oh, okay. So that gives me the validation to go, okay, I can do these things. and it's all right. Right. It just let it rip. So now I no longer, I mean, we've been together for many years, but I don't filter my sounds. I don't filter my faces. I don't, just whatever is going to happen is going to happen. You know, just those types of things. We talk to each other and tell each other, you know, what we think is hot, and all of that kind of thing. And it's been interesting. It's like it's a journey. I will say to you though, one other thing I definitely wanted to be sure to mention was, well, two things. One of them is exciting. So like I said, I have like this hyper, like just drive and everything. But then it's been funny because we have this really great sex. I'll have multiple orgasms. Like it was funny. I went to a party not long ago. We were at a friend's lifestyle party, and we went, and I was talking to, we go in as looky loos. That's what they were calling it. Like they're just hanging out. And this girl was talking to me, and she goes, "Oh yeah, I was so excited because I got 2 orgasms during sex." And I looked at her and went, "Only 2?" And she looked at me so funny. I was like, "I'm so sorry." I said, "I have a minimum requirement." And she busted out laughing. Died laughing. She thought that was so funny. And she goes, "Well, okay, how many are you getting? If that's if your minimum is 3," she goes, "What is your, like, what's the standard?" And I said, "I don't know, probably only like 7 or 8. And she goes, "What?" Yeah. And I said, "Yeah." And she goes, "That's regular for you?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "But we've been together a long time. Like, we know each other's bodies. I have a very sensitive body and all that." But it was so funny. Like it was the funniest, like,
I love that
fun.
though, because, everybody's different. Some people haven't had any orgasms in their life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so just having one is like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that just happened. Now I know what everyone's been talking about,
Which is wonderful. Yeah.
Exactly. So, 2 is sometimes like, hey, that's double the money. No, usually I'm lucky to get one. And, when you talk about the orgasm gap and women often getting less, sexual gratification than men and having less orgasms, it's a real common thing. And so, not that an orgasm should be the end all be all of sex. It's all about pleasure and enjoyment. But, if you're discounting the fact that you're going to even have one because you've never had one before, then you never will, so you have to have that as a goal, for sure. I love that you brought up a couple of things, the throw that you have. On my website, I have a store of different sex toys, lubes, and things like throws. And I have a liberator throw on this site that is exactly what you're talking about. It just makes sure nothing penetrates it. You know what I mean?
Nothing.
It's very absorbent.
Nothing.
It's great for squirting. It's great for, and you put it over your blanket and your pillow stays nice and clean. So I love that. And then you also mentioned that your husband was on the spectrum. He's autistic. And I had another person on the show. His name was Jake Dudinsky, and he was in the kink world. And he talked about how his autism affected his, his aftercare, and how he didn't like to cuddle afterwards. And so having that conversation with a new partner, a lot of people like to cuddle afterwards. And he was like, that's just not my thing. And so having that communication is so key. So I think it would be really fun if we did a role play around that. But before we do, I want to ask you one more question about thinking about considerations for someone that is neurodivergent or has a disability, because I think that a lot of times people with disabilities are just discounted as being asexual, like they have no sexuality. And that's absolutely ridiculous. We're all born sexual beings, and however we choose to sort of express that is our own choosing.
Yeah.
But how do we create a pleasurable environment for somebody with, for instance, some form of neurodiversity?
And I think this is true for, first of all humans, but then get even more specific, especially people with invisible or visible disability, neurodiversities. Be mindful of environment and ask them what they need, because different people will have different needs. Even different people with the same diagnoses will have different needs that they need addressed. And so, for instance, I don't like a lot of light because that can distract, my brain, and it can create kind of a stressful response sometimes. My husband likes to have sunlight, so we're just kind of careful, how we place that. Um, because of my MCAS, there are certain textures that my body doesn't like, so we're very mindful of, the types of blankets that we use, even the sex blanket. It same thing, just being very mindful of textures. Smell is a big one for a lot of people. Also, how is your body sitting? Laying down is not the best option for every person. Have pillows, have things to assist, have things to prop you up, have things there that are already just ready for comfort. I loved a while back, my husband had an injury, and I was having a separate physical issue. And so my husband came, we were gonna have sex, and he comes in with this armful of like pillows and blankets and things to like prop us and make us more comfortable and all these kinds of things. And we just had those things readily available so that we could gently shift them and move them as we needed to and as we felt comfortable. And then also emotional needs. So being mindful of music, how you speak to the other person, what's going on with them, and watch, especially with people with diagnoses such as bipolar, watch because their chemicals can start to do funny things during sex. So pay attention to that. Am I doing something that is causing, you know, the body chemicals to get out of whack? If so, what can we do about that? Or do we like that? Is this the thing we want to play with? Is this the thing we want to experiment with? And just really communicate those things and pay attention to your partner, watching their face, watching their muscles. Are there random spasms? Those types of things. Just paying attention and communication. That's, I think, everything. But don't be afraid to have props. It works.
100%, 100%. And again, on my store, we have wedges and pillows and all sorts of things that can help you to get into the right position. Because if you have an injury, you're not going to, be able to do like all of the positions that you like to do. You may have to change those things. And as we get older, same thing. The things that may have worked for you 10, 20 years ago may not be working for you anymore. And so having those props is absolutely a great tool. So I love that you brought that up. And I love that you brought up all of the sensory things, the lights, the sounds, the smells, like all of those things can play into the environment and make it more enriching, or it can make it worse. You know what I mean? So, like for me, I'm very light sensitive. So when I go outside, I always have sunglasses on. So even if like the window's open and like the sun is beaming through and it hits my eye, that could really throw me off. So like really creating an environment that's going to be, the best for you to like focus on connecting with your partner. So I love all of the examples that you gave. So thank you for that. I want to jump into our role play now. And we kind of talked about it a little bit beforehand. And we're doing a role play now as my final question. And I think we talked about maybe me being your student and you're going to be coaching me. And I have an invisible disability. And I'm going to be asking you about how to help me. So let's start with that. Okay. Does that sound good? All right. Very good.
Let's do it.
Okay. And action. So, Katherine, I have a question for you, and I'm a little bit embarrassed to talk to you about it because it's kind of personal, but I want to connect with my partner on a sexual level, but there's something about him that is throwing me off, and I don't know how to tell him. His beard is like really rough, and sometimes it makes me feel like pain. And I know that he's not trying to hurt me, but I don't know how to bring it up so that he doesn't get offended.
I completely understand. It's actually something to which I can relate, especially with my MCAS. That has definitely presented a problem in my personal relationship. So I can understand that. So the first thing I would say is when you approach him, remember to come at it from a point of curiosity. And one thing that I like to practice with conversations in my life, whether it's professional and personal, is bringing things from a point of ego and stress into a point of curiosity. And one of those things that you can do to kind of activate that is to first recognize where the ego mechanism lies so you can feel it activate, right? And it's part of our fight or flight response. You can feel it around the nape of your neck or the tops of your shoulders, upper part of your spine. And when you feel that, just take a deep breath, just and think, I am safe. I have oxygen to breathe. I have a roof over my head. I have food on the table. And this person is safe. And I just need to explain this to them because it's very easy if we ask for something and the other person maybe has questions or their feelings are a little bit hurt. It's very easy to go into the, I messed up and now I'm defending myself and it just escalates, right? So being receptive to that, you can also recommend that your partner do some of this grounding work ahead of time and just go, hey, there's something I want to talk to you about. It's about bringing us closer together. It's about uniting us. And it is about just a physical, a physical need of mine. And I just want to talk about it. So please let me know when you're ready. Because you don't want to do that like when somebody's dealing with a stress issue at work or something like that, right? So be mindful of your timing and then just come at it from a curiosity standpoint. So I would ask you to, so when you think about this, is it more about, yes, there is the physical element, but is it more about the emotional element for you, or is it more about the physical element for you?
It's more physical for me because I guess I'm hypersensitive and my skin is hypersensitive. And so it feels like chafing and it feels distracting and it hurts, and I want to let him know that it hurts, but I also don't want him to feel like he's doing something wrong.
Right. So do you otherwise like the actions that he's doing and the beard is in the way of those things, or would you just prefer that those things not happen in general?
Certain things I like, but when the beard is too close to me in certain areas, that's when I don't like it. Yeah.
Okay. So I would just talk to him about it and come with solutions. That's another really big part that a lot of people miss when having these intimacy conversations. First of all, make sure that he understands you like the beard, you think it looks, you think it looks good. If you do, you think it looks good. And never lie. It's not helpful. And
Right.
communicate that and say, it's just during sex, I need to find a solution to the fact that sometimes, I'm loving that you're doing this or liking that you're doing that. It makes me feel this way, but the beard rubs wrong. So start by saying, these are the things I'm loving. I'm wanting more of this. So we need to find a solution to this thing. And he might immediately say, okay, I'll shave it. Or he might say, okay, so what do you think we're gonna do? Or what am I supposed to do with this? And you could say, oh, well, we can, maybe use some coconut oil on your beard, kind of soften it up, see how that works. I'd just kind of throw out some different suggestions. Maybe he could angle his face a little differently because sometimes it's just the angle of what you're doing is just not quite right. So just being mindful and then coming up with a simple asking him, say, okay, what would be a comfortable way for me to signal you if something's uncomfortable in the moment? What's going to not take you out of it, but it's going to let me still share the issue and come up with that solution together.
And end scene. I love these role plays and they're so much fun and they're really amazing examples of how to communicate with somebody. And so I love that this was sort of like a student coach type of situation, but you brought up some really great points and coming to a consensus with the person and really trying to come up with a solution together and having some in your mind, but also asking for them to think about how they can also help to solve the problem so that you can continue enjoying yourself with that partner. And the idea is connecting energetically, right? So how can you do that on a more intimate, a deeper level? So I love all of what you said. So thank you so much. And I want to make sure that my listeners can find you. So could you let us know where they can find you?
Yeah. So first, I'm all over LinkedIn. I'm one of like 3 Katherine McCords on there with the spelling. So pretty easy to find that way. And I'm on there all the time. Also, my speaker site is kmccordspeaking.com. there's a contact form on there. You can always reach out to me there as well. Those are the two easiest ways. And any question you have, if you want to ask personal questions about diagnoses, if you want to ask about anything that we talked about here, please feel free to reach out. I'm absolutely happy to discuss any of these issues with you. If you think you might have neurodiversity, you can also reach out to me for that. That's kind of my jam. But yeah, I'm always open to talk and discuss and help people out.
Perfect. And I also want to make sure that my listeners can find me. So, and I'll make sure that I add her website and all of that to the show notes. And you can find me on pleaseme.online. And if you loved this episode as much as I loved recording it with Katherine, please take your phone right now and copy it and send it to a friend that you think might enjoy it as well. Someone that you think might relate, or you might have a laugh listening, or whatever it may be. Share it with somebody, and please leave reviews, because that is how podcasts grow. And so with that being said, I want to thank you so much for being on the show today. This was a lot of fun.
It's been my pleasure. Thanks again for having me, Eve.
You're welcome. Until next time. For ad-free listening, exclusive bonus episodes, Eve's library of archived webinars, and early access to new releases of Please Me, become a monthly supporter on Patreon. Simply open the Patreon app on your phone, search for Please Me, and subscribe today for premium content and more. Cheers to finding your pleasure and big clit energy.